is your lead medical director, who is like our favorite guy right now. He is very, very well aware of EMS and what you guys are expected to know and to do out there, as he was a paramedic long before he became a physician, and has also continued to work in the EMS capacity throughout his career, both in the military and in private practice, in the hospital practice, etc. So that having been said, I see Dr. Frame is going to be talking about scene safety and situational awareness tonight. I'm going to be muting my microphone and just lurking on the side here, and hopefully there will be no issues. And we will let Dr. Frame have it. Good luck. Have fun.
Very good. Well, welcome everybody, and it's good to meet you all. My name is Jim Frame, as Jane had pointed out, and I'm your lead medical director. Have been for the past 8 years now, on and off. But what we want to talk about today is something that has evolved within the National Registry over the past 2 years. It's become much more prominent in the news within the last year or so now, with COVID being around, and the peculiarities that's noted with COVID as far as PPE, emergency response, priority of response, and such. Now, what Jane had kind of alluded to is that I'm involved with several agencies and roles within the EMS system within the country. And one of them is that I write questions for the National Registry. So I get the questions to me, we toss them around a bit, see which ones have been tested, and what's been validated, what's reliable, accurate, and credible. And there's all kinds of statistical analysis that goes into it, but at the end of the day, it's the physicians that really write the questions for the National Registry. Now, there are certain areas within the National Registry that require paramedic involvement, firefighter involvement, such like that, most prominently within the operational aspect of EMS. As Jane had pointed out, I was a Chicago fireman before I got into medicine back in the 70s. Tested, got on, did a 2448, was assigned to an engine company, Engine 54 in Chicago, and spent 10 years there. So emergency operations have evolved in the past 40 years since I put on a helmet and rode the back step, when we literally rode the back step of the engine companies back then. But there are some common threads that we have had throughout the years. And number one is one of the most common ways of accidental death with firefighters and EMS responders is on the scene. The number one cause of death of firefighters, non-accidental, is heart attack. So conditioning and such is very important. But seeing that most of you are fairly young, it's not something that's going to get to the forefront of your concern about morbidity, mortality. What kills most EMS responders and what's firefighters, non-accidental, or either on the scene of a fire, or in the case of EMS personnel, motor vehicle accidents and domestic violence. Now, most police officers will tell you when they go to domestic disputes or domestics, what they call domestic, they'll tell you that those are pretty much the most dangerous encounters that they have because of the lethality that's involved. More times than not, there's fisticuffs going on, but every once in a while a weapon shows up, and it plays very badly for everybody involved, EMS included. So what we're going to talk about is something that's been evolving over the past 2 years when it comes to National Registry. Now, since I do write the questions, I have the objectives in front of me, and I have a pretty good insight as to what's on these exams, although I don't finalize the actual end of the questions as to what goes in the test bank. But we do have a very good idea here of what the objectives are. As you go through this presentation, the slide presentation that you're about to see, you'll see that there's some bold print. And it's those bold prints that have a nasty habit of showing up on the exam, sometimes verbatim. So if you're watching this presentation at home and you got pen and paper in front of you, it would be worth your while to copy down the bold prints. It would also behoove you to review this slide presentation once more before you get into your exam, as EMS operations constitutes about 6 to 10 questions, depending on how well you answer the questions. And so 6 to 10 questions is a fair amount of your test. It could very well be up to 10% of your grade. There's only 6 or 7 major areas that are tested. This is one of them. Within emergency operations, or emergency operations, scene safety and situational awareness make up between 5 and 7 of those 10 questions. So keep in mind that this is something that's evolved once again over the past 2 years, but has become incredibly important over the past year because of COVID and the number of EMS workers that have caught COVID virus and have had to be put in a situation where they treat and transport these patients as well. So without any further ado, let's get to the next slide here. You'll see your first 2 bold prints are here. So I'll talk in the background while you're madly copying down the bold print. But in essence, what are we looking for? When they talk about scene safety, from a fire officer's standpoint, when you arrive on the scene with an engine company and you got a working fire or a crashed vehicle or other horrendiomas that are going on within the world of EMS, you think about, do I look for down power lines? So I look for flaming vehicles. Am I looking for a propane tank, which is actually inside of a garage, or welding equipment where you've got both hydrogen as well as oxygen bottles burning very brightly? Do you have burning magnesium? Do you have hazardous materials? And these are all the things that you're looking for when you talk about scene safety. But more times than not, the only place you're really going to find this with any kind of regularity is on the National Registry. These things just don't happen a lot. For the 10 years that I was full-time as a firefighter in Chicago, I can count on 2 hands how many times I've seen down power lines from auto accidents, or exploding gas tanks, exploding propane tanks. We didn't see it. And I was in an inner city engine company too. We were the 3rd busiest in Chicago, and you just don't see some of this stuff. However, it's low frequency, but it's high danger. In other words, when you do see it, something very bad is going on, and it could very well cost the lives of you and your colleagues out on the scene if you're not at least aware of the situation. And so looking for down power lines, looking for hazardous materials, propane tanks. Back in the 70s, when we had the gasoline crisis, we had people actually storing 55-gallon drums of gasoline in the garages. One genius even had a 55-gallon drum filled with gasoline inside of his house, which made for a very quick fire. It blew and it was done. The house didn't exist anymore. Neither did he. These are just things that can happen out there. So even though you have to have a high index of suspicion, in other words, you have to be thinking about what's the worst possible scenario am I running into. More times than not, you are going to not run into it. But that doesn't mean you keep your guard down. All right, so you had it down, Wayne. Okay, good to meet you. We had a down power line at a structure fire. We killed power to house. The connection from the pole to the home burned. Line was still hot. Yeah. Now, in structure fires like that, where you've got 13-2 wires coming down from the top of a pole or a transformer into a home, you will find some down power lines there. No doubt about it on structures, especially some of the older structures that are out there still going to have telephone poles and elevated lines and such like that. Those are all things that are peculiar to a fire scene. As far as EMS operations are concerned, it's going to be very rare that the paramedics going to be in before the first firefighters are stretching line into the building and knocking down the fire. When you talk about fire safety, when you talk about safety officers or fire officers, company officers, and scene size up, that's a different priority. And when we went into fires, we had to watch for all kinds of stuff, including down power lines. But the focus of this lecture is really going to be on EMS operations and how you approach the vehicle where power lines may be down. When I responded to Hurricane Laura just last month, we had a plethora of down power lines, zero power through the city. Yeah, that's a different situation. Now, when we talk about disasters, when you talk about wide area disasters, back in Chicago, we had in 1974, we had an airplane that was coming down in the Midway Airport and came up just a little short, like about 8 blocks, and landed within a group of houses. You're going to get those disasters every once in a while where anything goes and you can run into anything, and most likely you'll run into everything. Those are peculiar type of disasters where you got multiple agencies on the scene, each one working independently, but yet communicating with each other in a very robust manner in order to keep everybody safe, but also aware of situations such as now we've got ruptured gas lines because houses were taken off at the foundation. You got down power lines, of course. And every single hydrant was taken right off at its stem. So now you got water shooting straight up, which is making the down power lines a little easier to find because they're arcing all over the place. And then every single type of injury that you can possibly imagine, from the 45 people that were killed on the plane with the 45 that survived, and all the other people that were hurt in their houses and such. I mean, it's just, disasters are a different animal altogether. But interesting nonetheless, and I would encourage each and every one of you as EMS operatives in the future that if you ever have a chance to get a deployment into a COVID environment, a hurricane environment, or if you're called out on one of those special wildfire emergencies like they have in the West Coast, try to do one at least once in your lifetime. And you'll never have another experience like it ever. They are, quite frankly, the best teachers that are out there. There's nothing like doing the job. Yeah, they're humming already. Let's see what else we get. We keep guessing in our house. If you knew the inner city of Chicago, you wouldn't ask the question. Shay, it's there's a lot of strange folks out there and that time in the 70s, you had to actually keep your car locked up in your garage because people would go from car to car and actually siphon gas. People were stealing gas because of the gas crisis. Subsequently, these folks found it, I think, more attractive to put a 55-gallon drum of gasoline in their home to protect it from the thieves. It did. The thieves had nothing to get, after it blew. There was actually nothing left of the house to steal either. It's an interesting phenomenon. All right, so what's the most dangerous EMS operations out there? From an EMS operations standpoint, it's similar to fire department operations, and at any time that you have a dynamic situation going on where things could still happen. And so you think about everything that are out there, from hurricanes, tornadoes, to floods, to wildfires and such, including the man-made disasters, dams that break, airplanes that crash, etc. You find that anything dynamic, anything that has a lot of moving parts to it, and anything that's still evolving is fair game here. It's one thing if a tornado rips through. For EMS operations, you get out there and you see the field of damage in the zone of destruction and such. It's another thing to try and do those EMS operations while the tornado is still going on. Adds a bit of excitement to the whole scenario as you're dodging badness that's going on out there. It's the same thing with motor vehicle accidents, or like Wayne had brought up, structure fires, where things evolve by the minute. And if you're not reading the building properly, if you're not reading the smoke, you're not reading the traffic very well, and the time of day and the weather conditions and such, you'll find that you'll get yourself into trouble very, very quickly. So from an EMS operations standpoint, the most dangerous dynamic situation is going to be motor vehicle accidents on a busy interstate. They probably present the biggest challenges, and this is where a lot of people are killed or injured each year, from construction workers on high-speed lanes to firefighters, paramedics, police officers. The MVC environment is very, very dynamic, and people are always trying to game the system, whether they're going around barricades or the engine companies that are set up with their rear ends hanging out the next lane to keep people from running into firefighters. I mean, if you think about it, and Wayne could probably appreciate this best as a firefighter, is there's a reason why we put 26 tons of apparatus across 2 lanes, because there was a time when we pull the fire apparatus off on the shoulder and then go and work the car accident. Next thing you know, we're getting creamed out there. We're getting cars just piling into you, whether it's a drunk driver at night, whether it's just people not paying attention, they're ignorant, they're having some sort of medical condition, or otherwise they're just being asses, but they try to game the system, get around cars, and the next thing you know, they run into you. So as a result of a lot of firefighters and police officers and EMS personnel being killed, we started putting fire apparatus right smack dab in the middle of lanes 1 and 2. And sometimes if we had a truck company out there, you could stretch it across the shoulder +2 to block traffic and keep it away. At least the guy that's barreling at 60 miles per hour is going to have to go through the engine or the truck to get to the accident where we're all working. Subsequently, not a whole lot of people can do that, and the car usually stops at the engine company, smashed into the side of it, and then of course you got a second car accident they have to deal with, another victim. But if you think about the evolution of safety and the fire scene, why engine companies block traffic, this is the reason. Because in the 60s and 70s and even the 80s, until safety really started becoming a more pressing issue, we were killing a lot of firefighters out there and killing a lot of EMS people. Chicago was no different. We had a lot of accidents on the interstates that resulted in a lot of firefighter deaths as a result of people just being careless out there. Okay, I have another question. Las Vegas, a few months ago, I'll catch fire, and although we were staged with metal, there was a hole. Trying to get to this. Yeah, the OO squad shows up at these things too. The OO squad is a bunch of people that come out, stand right in the middle of all the work that you're trying to do and say, uh-oh, what's going on? That's anywhere. In Chicago, we call them a gaper's block. Even though we had 6 lanes and a Dan Ryan going in one direction, if there was an accident of any consequence for fire apparatus around the scene, and a car is flipped over or sitting on its side and such like that, the opposite side traffic, the southbound lanes, would actually be backed up all the way to downtown because everybody has to stop and look, and they usually have their eyes wide open and their mouth wide open, which is why we call them gapers. When you gape at it with your mouth open and your eyes wide open and not blinking and going, oh my God, look at that. You slow down or you stop. Well, the Dan Ryan's a 70-mile-per-hour, 6-lane interstate. And when you're doing 20 miles per hour, it either causes its own bunch of car accidents or causes what we call a gaper's block. So yeah, spectators, they pose a different problem altogether. I mean, they're nice to have out there. It's nice to have a crowd. It's like playing baseball, you know, you want the stadium full. And so when we get on fires or accidents, you didn't mind people watching because that's what you do. You know, people are going to watch fires and they're going to watch firemen put out the fires and such. But yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It's not so much a crowd pleaser anymore as much as it is a safety hazard. Yeah, rubberneckers. That's funny. I didn't know that, but I'll remember that. All right. Well, let's keep pressing. So here we go with, yep, I got it. So we transition. You transition from scene safety to situational awareness. So the magic words now that you'll see on the National Registry is situational awareness. If that's not part of the question, it's going to be part of the answer. You see the word situational awareness, and one of the answers, more likely than not, that's the answer. So in what we call traffic incident management areas, TIMAs, depending on what part of the country that you're from, you notice that when you set barricades, when you set your engine companies, or even squad cars at the top of a hill, you know, 300 feet from the accident scene, blah, 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 that they're still finding ways to get around. And more times than not, if it's a reckless person, such as a person who's speeding or somebody who's intoxicated on either drugs or alcohol, that they try to get around, they try to squeeze their little 5.5-foot wide car through a 4-foot space between the Jersey barriers and the engine company to try and keep going on their way home. Subsequently, it's a problem with two objects trying to occupy the same space at the same time, and nothing good ever comes out of it. So when you arrive on the scene, when you're placing your initial apparatus, especially you folks who tend to be first on the scene of any major vehicle incident or on a major thoroughfare and such, that first few moments is going to be real dangerous for you because you're trying to stop everything behind you and at the same time set up the apparatus so that you're not allowing yourself to be injured by somebody trying to come through at 70 miles per hour and rearrange the accident scene for you. Subsequently, as an EMS person, if there's an opportunity for you to follow an engine or a trunk company in and let them do the block first, and then you scooch around them and get either in front of the accident where you have immediate egress out the opposite way, or at least in a position where you can load your patient and at the same time give plenty of other access to other apparatus. And if you're part of EMS that's not associated with a fire department or an incident command structure and such, this is where it gets into opportunities where you can sit with the firefighters and chat or participate in their drills and how to place apparatus at a scene. establishing a standard operating procedure, if you will, where the ambulance should be, where it should, where you should offload, if you are first on the scene, how you should position your apparatus, and then where the engine and truck companies are going to go. This is where experienced paramedics really have an edge, in that if they can see if there's fire associated with it, obviously the engine's got to get a little close. I'm not fond of stretching 300 feet of hose just so that you can have your ambulance real close to the car. I would be more in favor of me being about 50 to 75 feet from the car, where I can pull a short bumper line and put water on the fire right away, and then protect you guys as we pull victims. It makes it much more efficient and much less aggravating when we go for scene cleanup afterwards than not rolling 300 feet of hose. It takes me a long time to move 300 feet, which is 100 yards, which is a football field, to move that line and then to send water to me. It could waste a lot of time, precious time that we really need for those victims. All right, I got another question. This is good. I like the questions. What is your opinion on scene lights to the rear when on scene, whether on fire apparatus or an ambulance? I'm not a big fan of them going to the rear. You can blind drivers coming up to the scenes and such like that, and it's hard to visualize, if you will, the nice yellow and red stripes that we have on the back. We got quite a bit of flashing red lights and such like that, where if that doesn't alert somebody that there's emergency vehicles in front of them, then they're impaired for some reason. But when you throw big lights on somebody, they can't tell, even a person who's sober, they can't tell moving at 70 miles per hour, which is about 120 some odd feet per second. If it's street lights, if there's other type of lights, if it's even construction. So rear facing floodlights that are not directed to the scene itself to light the area, I think is not something we were big on, to be honest with you. So that's my opinion on it. But fortunately, it's not tested on a national registry. It may be tested if you're part of a fire department. It may be tested as a fire officer, especially fire officer 2, where you got truck companies on the scene and your captains are on your truck companies. But from our standpoint, our experience, when you blind oncoming traffic, they can't see the flashing red lights or backup lights or anything when you've got that kind of candle power shining in their face. So, culture of situational awareness, alive and ever evolving. So the bold print, alive and ever evolving, is kind of trigger words that you'll get in some benign question. Now remember, we have 2,000 questions in the question bank. When you go to take your exam, you sign up for it, you say, okay, I'm ready to take the paramedic exam. The computer system goes into the servers in Columbus, Ohio, the National Registry, and they pull down 100 questions, 6 to 10 out of each category, randomly selected, and are placed as your exam. So you may get these questions, you may not get these questions. I can tell you it's more likely than not that you will get these questions, because we have about 50 or 60 questions that are the same or similar that have these type of trigger words that are in them in the bold prints here. So alive and ever evolving in a culture of awareness. Scenes are never ever static. In other words, there's very rarely is it something where you pull up on the scene and it stays the same way no matter what. Could be for a person passed out on a sidewalk, you know, and you pull up as EMS, but even then the patient himself can evolve and he can change as well. So it's not a it's not a benign situation with most, if not all, scenes, is that they're going to constantly evolve, and they're going to constantly evolve, and they're going to constantly change. And you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware about it on the National Registry when it asks you, geez, what are you worried about on the scenes? Well, I'm worried that the scene is alive and it's evolving, and I have to keep up with the changes. So let's address a couple questions here. Is it the same for the EMT National Registry exam? Yes, absolutely. What's my opinion on accessing an MBC that is out of the traffic flow, but on the other side of a Jersey barrier? If you're first on the scene, you approach approaching the scene from the opposite way. You know, there's going to be times, especially in busy downtown areas or interstates, that have real fast traffic flow, reversible lanes, or construction that are going on where the Jersey barriers are up and such. And it may be 2, 3, 4 miles for you to travel with the ambulance or the engine or the truck or rescue squad to do a turnaround and come back the other way. As long as you've got apparatus that are responding in the same direction and will be able to put up a traffic block for you, then I don't see a problem with you stopping on the opposite lane and blocking off a shoulder +1. This time you're going to have to kind of park it out though, and getting out of the rig, jumping the Jersey barriers to help out. Now, if I'm your company officer and we're pulling up to a scene and there is no emergency vehicles on the opposite side, and I'm stopped on the opposite direction traffic, I won't allow it. You just can't throw your guys over the barriers and then have them attend to a vehicle that's on the shoulder. And be protected. Your number one safety precaution, your number one reason for being out there, and your number one priority always are the people that are on your ambulance or on your engine companies or your truck companies. The accident has already happened. People are already hurt. More people are going to get hurt. But you cannot afford to have your firefighters or your fellow paramedics getting injured trying to save them. First of all, you can't sue them. Firefighters rule, can't sue them. There's laws against that. If you're a firefighter or an EMS person, you cannot sue the other person for being negligent. It's part of the job. So why risk it? It sucks about the fifth climb over the barrier in full turnout gear with SCBA, and you want to punch the DO for not going around. Yeah, and you're going to have to smack the officer too for telling him, "Hey, stop here. Let's get out and figure this out." No, you don't want to do that. Driver operator or the engineer where I'm from is, of course, going to take orders from the officer. If the company officer, though, can't see that there's emergency apparatus pulling up on the side or is about to pull up on the opposite flow of traffic to throw their apparatus as blocking, as a blockade, then you're going to have to take the extra couple of minutes to go down and come back around again. There's just no safe way to manage those kind of accidents and keep your people safe. And it's a tough decision sometimes because you may see that somebody is very, very hurt, or God forbid, a pedestrian was in the middle of a 6-lane highway and they tend to stroll out there once in a while. It's really bleeding badly. The temptation is to drop somebody and get out there and help them right away. As a company officer, as the senior paramedic, or even if you're riding seat that day, you have to resist the urge to committing your people to a dangerous situation without proper precautions. And if that means the apparatus has to go around and come back down the opposite way, so be it. And this is going to be the difference between a company officer and a good company officer, where all the guys go home at the end of the day. You know, every scene is different, Wayne. You can't have a one size fits all. It's like fighting fires. And I'll talk to you, firefighter. There are no two house fires the same. There's no two structures that are the same. And boy, as you get more and more into extra alarms and such, when you pull a box or a deuce, and position of the apparatus and how you stage them, and what you want your extra alarm companies to be doing. When do you put up sticks, and when do you go to surround and drown? When do you go offensive? When do you go defensive? Every scene is going to be different. We can probably sit here and talk all night about certain situations where, yeah, you know what, I probably would drop somebody there to tend to somebody that's hurt and bring them back, because it was a calculated risk. You don't want to take a gamble. You want to take a calculated risk. If you're going to commit the lives of one of your people to do something where common sense tells you not to, but the situation mandated or dictated that, you know what, I knew I could pull this off without harming anybody or putting anybody in a unnecessary risk. Big difference. And so keep in mind, there's always a difference between a gamble and a calculated risk. All right, next slide. Hey, I got this really cool thing here. So watch what happens when scenes start getting evolving. All of a sudden, the planets, which were all lined up before, are not all lined up anymore. And that's the theory and the practicality. That's the price and the boundary of getting on the scene of a motor vehicle accident and then having the whole accident evolve right in front of your eyes. And what was a nice, neat, and clean, everybody's lined up and nobody's hurt, all of a sudden can turn into a real shit show out there. In the military, we call it a Charlie Foxtrot. It's a situation that can go bad, and it did go bad. What you don't want it to do is go bad at the price of one of your crew members, or God forbid, it's you that got committed to a situation that you shouldn't have been committed to, but for the egregiousness or the inexperience of some 22-year-old company officer with no fire experience or very little fire experience, but around a small fire department, and subsequently they ride seat as a company officer, and the next thing you know, people are getting hurt. You need your more experienced people out there calling the shots, and that's a fact of life. So you also have to be alert that if you're on one of those engine companies, or if you're on an ambulance and you've got another person that's riding with you who's in charge and doesn't have much more experience than you do, you have to have a heightened awareness of your safety as well, and do not allow yourself to be put in a bad situation. Yeah, let me see what the question is here. In the military, we utilize a risk matrix before every movement to help analyze and assess our consequences. Well, I didn't know you were military. That's interesting. I'm a colonel in the Air Force and a deputy commander of a medical operations squadron. We'll have to chat offline about the military. What branch are you in? Good for you. Good for you. What's your AFSC? Okay, good deal. Welcome. Very fond of military people. We can chat a little bit later. Tactical medicine seems to be pretty good, but there's nothing like combat medicine and the training that goes with it. Best training in the world. All right, so the only controllable and predictable factor is you. I put that as number one because that is one of the questions that's on the National Registry. Now, it's not going to be question number 10, the only controllable predictable factor is A, B, and C, and D. It's going to be embedded in a question. So be alert for the concept. The concept is that you are the only controllable and predictable factor. That doesn't mean you get the freelance. Okay? You set within a standard operating procedure, you move in that direction, you move according to the standard operating procedure and the needs of the scene at the direction of a company officer or incident commander if the incident's big enough. You don't get to do things on your own. While everybody's trying to extricate, you don't get to go over and start on a fourth or a fifth vehicle. You don't get to do things that you're not supposed to be doing. Freelancing out on a fire scene is just like freelancing in a motor vehicle accident. It's going to get people killed. And so subsequently, you train, you do your job like you train like you do your job. And subsequently, when you start getting cocky out there or arrogant, or God forbid, around the 2nd to 5th year, especially as firefighters, 2nd to 5th year where you've got a couple hundred runs under your belt and you probably got 25, 30, 35 structure fires under your belt, you start getting cocky and you start feeling like, you know what, I can do this job. And then you turn around and you stick your head someplace where it's not supposed to be and you get biffed on the head. These are bad things that happen. So we don't freelance on the scene. You are controllable, you are predictable because you're the one that knows your capabilities and your capacity. And for you to say, hey, look, I'm better, or I think this should be done, the incident commander doesn't know what they're doing, and they take a stroll out there and do something that they're not supposed to do, it can cost some people. It can get people killed and get people injured quite quickly. Because again, these scenes are alive and they're constantly evolving. Okay, so you're really the one that tells you how to walk, talk, place your bags, place your hands, where you kneel, where you sit, and how you're going to position yourself for the interim moments while you decide and how a particular job has to be done, whether you're kneeling at the side of a patient who's laying flat on the ground trying to stop bleeding, or whether you're on your knees with a Hearst tool or one of the other hydraulic tools that are out there, trying to position it so that you can get a competent extrication going. No matter what it is in life, operational risk management, as Laura brought up, ORM, operational risk management is going to be deciding what the situation is, analyzing the situation, analyzing what could go wrong, and whether this is the best option, and performing that option. It's a 6-step process. As a colonel, I give myself some officer leeway and cut it down to 4. But the bottom line is you never stop analyzing what could happen next. And you need to be aware of what's around you. Okay, so criterion-based decisions for scene management. We talk about 3 things really that come about as far as scene management's concerned, and we're going to go through those steps here in a second. But the single most important thing is communication coordination with multiple agencies on the scene. Now, what you're going to get on your question in the National Registry is a question that says something along the lines of, let's see how we rephrased it. You got a large incident, maybe even a disaster. Multiple agencies are involved in such like that. What are the 2 most important priorities or 2 most important aspects of a management of a disaster situation? It's going to be communication coordination. It's going to be managing resources. But your communication coordination with multiple agencies on the scene is pretty much what the answer is going to be for you. So we look at things from a conceptual standpoint, or how we refer to things in the Air Force as CONOPS, concept of operations. Ooh, there's a nice long one. Okay, Shay, let's see what you got there. It's about SceneSafety. On this page, an upset male a while back. Just upon our arrival, officer met outside, told his patient wasn't happy and wanted to commit suicide. Officer stated he cleared the scene of any weapons or hazards. The resident was 12-foot really entered, pulled the gun off from under himself and attempted to shoot himself. Very important lesson. Yeah, and there could have been some badness there. Not only do you end up dead or seriously injured, but the police officer's career is now ruined because you relied on him to say something. Now, we can have a discussion one day about how much reliance you put on another person. If another doctor comes in with me into the emergency department, I tell him, hey, I just checked that and it looked pretty good, and this is what we're doing here, here, and here. He moves on to something else and it turns out I'm wrong. Patient dies and we're both in trouble. This is where coordination really, really has to be tight. This is where knowing the person really has to be your first and foremost. And you should be able to read people. You should be able to look somebody in the eye as they're talking to you about something and see if they're looking down, looking away, looking up in the air, looking anywhere but at you. A person who's confident what they're doing and telling you is going to look you square in the eye, and they're going to say it with some authority. If they're not sure, they're looking down, they're looking away, or they're stuttering or otherwise stepping all over themselves, then you can trust them, but then verify. Verify that the person does not have a weapon on them. Stand them up. Keep their hands behind their back. Walk them out of the RV. Walk them out wherever you need to. But I got to tell you something. If you guys are looking for 100% safety within a profession, then I would probably seek another line of work, because police, fire, and EMS is not it. For a long time in the 70s, the number one most dangerous peacetime occupation in the United States was firefighting. We averaged about 120 to 130 deaths a year firefighting. And it wasn't until in the 80s when we started getting safer and better, and EMS started getting much safer and much better, that we started seeing those numbers go way down to the point where we're no longer the most dangerous job that's out there. But for a long time we were. And it was because of a lack of situational awareness and lack of safety precautions, safety procedures and such. And we just winged it back then. And it was kind of one of those times in our lives where the country was burning, the fire codes weren't really that great. And subsequently, everybody was crashing in the buildings trying to get the fire out. And at the same time, it led to a lot of deaths. So we got smarter, we got better. Today's firefighters much better equipped and much smarter than we were back then, that's for sure. All right, I know that this is supposed to be a 1 hour thing, and we're coming up to the last 10 minutes, so let's see if we can't get through this. So safety is your first concept. We want to maintain safety, okay? Personal protective equipment, PPE, whether you're running on a COVID patient, you got your N95 and your gloves and your plastic gown, or whether, like Wayne had suggested earlier, whether you're in full SCBA, the big tanks that they wear on their backs with the big mask on their face, and carrying around 43 pounds of equipment between boots, bunker pants, bunker coats, and helmets, trying to vault over Jersey barriers. Nonetheless, it's still personal protective equipment. And if your department policy is that you wear that equipment prior to any encounter with, and then fill in the blank, then you do it. You do it because that's what policy says. But if it doesn't call for it, you should be doing it anyway. Because once you catch COVID, once you get burned in a fire, once you go through a floor, it's not fun, and subsequently easily avoided is going to be one of the things on the NIFRS report, on the reports that get sent in that say, how is this accident avoidable? And the answer is better educate the doofus who didn't do what he was supposed to do. So we call them geniuses. Okay, so yep. Okay, Shay, Andrew, have a good time. Stay safe. All right, so the first one, maintaining safety out there, has 4 components here. PPE, you want to get as much on scene, and this should have been highlighted. So the first part of that sentence there should be bold printed. As much information about the likely dangers on the scene as possible prior to arrival. So the first one's PPE, the second one's info. The third one is how do you park the ambulance or park your apparatus to provide as much protection as possible to your crew. That includes you, but it includes the person's life that you've been charged with for that shift to protect them and make sure that they go home at the end of their shift as well. So you're parking it for 2 people if you're on an ambulance and up to 6 people if you're on an engine or a truck company. And then you ensure that the ambulance is parked in such ways to make rapid egress from the scene. So if something bad is about to go down, if there's a hazmat situation that you weren't aware of until you pulled up, you want your apparatus positioned so that you can get in it and pull out as soon as possible. So let's go over the 4. Your first concept is maintaining safety. And there's 4 components. PPE, obtaining as much information as possible, providing enough barricades and barriers, including parking your apparatus to protect everyone on the scene as best as possible, and to make sure that you've also positioned your apparatus to make a rapid egress if needed. Okay, we go to the second concept, maintaining communications. Now, you need good communication. If you're not talking to each other, you're camping. You're not doing anything out there. Subsequently, you need to be communicating. That doesn't mean overwhelming the airwaves, and we all know people love to hear themselves on the radio, especially if the speakers are on the engine, you can hear yourself coming back. It's a self-glorification, if you will, big self-bias there, but you have to be kind of alert for people who like to hear themselves talk. So you keep your communications succinct, you keep them as needed, but you have to communicate well. So after the PPE and after you maintain safety by putting in your PPE, your early scene assessment has to include the scene report by the paramedic. So you arrive on the scene, you've got your 4 pieces of safety done, then you get on the horn and you start calling dispatch and you say, I've got a 4-car accident, 3 victims, one's on its roof. I need police, I need fire, and I'm going to need a second, a third, and maybe even a third ambulance. Always used to request one more than what you really needed, because invariably somebody will decide that they need to go to the hospital after they see everybody else leaving and figuring out that they don't have a ride home. So You'll get on the scene and you'll make your size up. And your size up is going to follow whatever mnemonic that you want it to follow. There's 13 steps to sizing up a structure fire, and yet there's 5 to size up a motor vehicle accident. Yet one could use all 13. But the big 5, the exact location, the type of event, the hazards on the scene, are the ones that are most tested by the National Registry. So your first paramedic on the scene does not run up to the first person and put a bandage on them or start whatever it is. The first person on the scene will do a size up. And that size up has to be communicated to dispatch. Medic 83 is on the scene at such and such a place, cross street to such and such. I got a 3-car accident here. I got 4 victims. I need an engine company. I need 3 more ambulances, and I need a rescue squad for extrication. And you need police. Then you tend to the patients. You got to get your resources out there. And so that first paramedic on scene priority for a scene size up is very important. It has to be one of the first things that you do out there. Okay, the type of event we just talked about, the hazards on the scene, power lines down, building structure collapse, multiple vehicles, high-speed highway, all of it, trench rescue, quick water rescue, whatever you're involved with. Scene size up is going to be very, very important. Access, how are you going to get in, how are you going to get out? What are you going to leave room for? Geez, let's see, I got 2 people to be extricated out of this vehicle. I'm going to need 3 more ambulances over here, and this vehicle's starting to get on fire. I think I'm going to move the ambulance around the other side of this whole accident so that the engine and rescue squads can get in here and start their either stretch in line or putting out extrication equipment there and having access. The last thing they want to do is be walking around an ambulance. And then after the apparatus, of course, shows up and they've got the entire scene completely blocked, then you load up your patient and the driver gets in and tries to pull away and oops, now we got to move 3 pieces of apparatus so we can get you out to get the patient to the hospital. That's a sign of a very incompetent scene out there. Subsequently, common sense is going to have to prevail, but one of the things that you have to consider in that 5-step process in evaluating a motor vehicle accident, if you're on a first arriving ambulance company and incident command is not on the scene, you're going to have to figure out where you're going to put your apparatus. Block the scene, protect you and your partner or a second partner. But then if there's going to be more needs and such like that at the earliest convenience, once other blocking apparatus gets on the scene, move that ambulance to a place where you can get out quickly if you have to. Okay. And then, of course, we have a combination here for large disasters and such. But when you get into a disaster situation, incident command is on the scene. And there'll be a medical commander that'll be with that incident commander as well, and you'll receive your direction from them. We're just talking smaller operations right now for the sake of this lecture. Okay, and then again, when you're on the scene and you're giving your initial size up, you're going to be the person that's in command until higher ranking people get on the scene, or in the case of EMS, if fire department gets on the scene and they have a chief or an officer that's going to assume command. Now, what you want to do when you establish command, when you get on the scene, after you call in your size up, is you'll say, Medic 83 in command. And it's not so much that you're going to be running the whole shooting match. It's going to be those first 2 companies are going to be coming in, or the first 2 ambulances, and they're going to say, where do you want us? Or what's our assignment? And you're going to have to place those first 2 pieces of apparatus and say, I've got somebody who needs to be extricated, or I got a fire that's starting in the back of this vehicle or in the front of the engine. You're going to at least tell the second company coming in what they're up against and what you need for for what needs to be done on the scene, what you need for them to be doing. That's why you establish command. And then they're going to say, okay, we're going to take over command. Fine by me, because I'm the paramedic and I got to be treating patients. I can't worry about placing all these apparatus. I'll place the first one or two companies coming in because this is what I need from them as my immediate need. After that, they'll take over. Okay, and remember, don't ever forget, there's two of you. You got 6 people. You're in a triage situation. And so you're not going to be treating people based on CPR or who are already dead or are dying. You're going to be treating people that have the best chance for survival. So your red tags, your priority ones, deserve your most attention. Your black tags, not so much. First paramedic on the scene runs around all 6 people, or how many people are out there, and starts dropping triage tags on each person so that the next ambulance companies coming in know exactly who they need to be going to. Triage priorities are always and should stay foremost on your mind when it comes to multiple victim incidents. Okay, so quick down and dirty. We did bust the hour, sorry about that. But that's it in a nutshell. I encourage you to go back over those slides, grab the bold prints, and decide how you're going to study for the exam when it comes to EMS operations. You're going to find that everything in these slides are pretty much in a nutshell what you're going to be getting on the exam. You're most welcome, Katie Lynn.
Anybody else have anything for Dr. Frame? You guys did a great job of participating tonight, so everybody got credit. And if you are in a class other than 400, you got credit for chat. And if you were in 400, which I don't think anybody was, and you had already done all your roundtables, and you got credit for chat. Thank you, Mary Beth. If you're talking about this presentation, it usually takes me a few days to get it because I have to download it when nobody's drawing on internet bandwidth, and then I have to convert it, re-upload it, and then I have to put the link in to percomcourses.com. But once you log in on the right-hand side, there's a link that says MD Roundtable, and this will be there probably in a week or less, and all of the prior roundtables are there as well. So you can flip back through for topics that interest you, or just listen to as many as you can because they're great. Sounds perfect. Okay. Well, everybody, y'all did great tonight. Dr. Frame, thank you so much.
You are most welcome, Jan. You guys take care.